My name is Amelia Brooks, and for years my life was a picture of quiet, predictable harmony. I was a literature professor at a quaint liberal arts college in upstate New York. My husband, Nathaniel Cross, taught political theory, a man of structure, precision, and remarkable self-discipline. Where I favored warmth and softness, he preferred clarity and control. Yet somehow we made it work. Mornings began with coffee brewed by routine, conversations about books and classes, and soft kisses before heading out the door. Evenings were spent in our modest apartment, tucked inside a charming brick building meant for faculty housing. Nathaniel cooked, I folded laundry or reviewed essays, and our daughter Lily danced between us, her laughter echoing off the walls like music. We weren't passionate, not in the way novels describe, but we were steady, safe. I thought that mattered more, say. Then Scarlett Wren moved in next door. She wasn't just beautiful, she was breathtaking, effortlessly magnetic, the kind of woman who could wear red lipstick and make it look like armor. Every man noticed her, every single one, except Nathaniel. He dismissed her with a scoff. At least that's what I believed, until the elevator fell. It happened on a Wednesday evening, just before dinner. Nathaniel, Lily, and I were headed out for a quiet birthday meal. Nothing extravagant, just our little family doing what we always did. As we stepped into the elevator, I noticed Scarlett slipping out of her apartment across the hall. Her perfume reached us before she did. Sweet, expensive, and unmistakably hers. She greeted me first with that effortless charm of hers, then knelt down to pat Lily's head. But when her eyes met Nathaniel's, something in her smile tightened, pulled inward, like she was folding herself into formality. "Mr. Cross," she said politely, stepping into the elevator with us. Nathaniel didn't reply. His gaze was locked on the elevator panel. The air felt thick, humming with tension I didn't quite understand. Scarlett moved to the far corner. I stood with Lily beside me, holding her small hand in mine. The doors shut. Then, without warning, the elevator gave a sickening jolt. The floor dropped. My stomach lurched into my throat. Lily screamed, and I instinctively wrapped my arms around her, pulling her close, shielding her as the elevator plunged. It lasted only a few seconds, the kind that stretch into forever, before the brakes kicked in with a brutal metal-grinding halt. We were caught just above the ground floor. The silence afterward was deafening, as if the world had paused to take a breath. Heart-pounding, I looked around. Lily was sobbing softly into my shoulder, but she was safe. I exhaled, trying to steady myself until my eyes landed on Nathaniel. He wasn't looking at us. He was holding Scarlett, not just steadying her, holding her. Their bodies were pressed together, her face buried in his chest, his arms wrapped around her so tightly I could see his knuckles go white. His cheek brushed her hair. His eyes were closed. It was the kind of embrace meant for someone you'd die for. A flash of red on his shirt caught my attention. Her lipstick smeared across the fabric like a wound. I couldn't breathe. Lily's small voice broke the moment. "Daddy, don't be scared. We're okay now." Nathaniel blinked and looked at me, eyes wide, as if just realizing where I stood. He let go of Scarlett abruptly, stepping back, his face twisting with something. Panic, guilt, shame. I thought you were right here," he said, voice hoarse. I didn't answer, I just watched. Scarlett stood frozen, a tremor running through her lips. There was fear in her eyes. Yes, but something else too. Something raw and almost triumphant. We rode the rest of the way in silence. That night, Nathaniel didn't touch me. He lay beside me in bed, tense, facing the wall. And I stared at the ceiling for hours, replaying the way he held her, with urgency, with instinct, with a kind of desperation I had never felt from him before. Not once, not ever. 2 nights after the elevator incident, Scarlett appeared at our door, carrying a woven basket brimming with fresh strawberries. She wore a soft white dress that clung to her frame, her hair still damp from a recent shower, strands sticking gently to her collarbone. She looked radiant. Effortless. "I thought you and Lily might enjoy these," she said with a syrupy smile, handing me the basket. I thanked her with genuine civility. I even bit into one, savoring its sweetness, before casually passing the basket to Nathaniel. Without a word, he took it. like a routine. Like we'd done this exchange 100 times. He carried it into the kitchen, washed the fruit, and transferred them meticulously into glass containers, labeling them before placing each in the fridge. Always so precise, so composed. Scarlett watched him work with something close to fascination. I didn't realize Mr. Cross was so thorough around the house. I smiled and reached for a napkin to clean the juice from my fingers. He's excellent at everything, I said, just the way I like it. Nathaniel returned and sat at the far end of the couch, pulling out his phone, directly across from Scarlett, who had taken the single armchair. Their knees almost touched. She crossed one leg over the other, slow and deliberate. Actually, Amelia, she said to me, I've been reading more about American history lately. I'm finding it fascinating, but confusing. I was wondering if Nathaniel might help explain a few things. I looked at her carefully. Her eyes flicked toward my husband as she spoke, lips curling into a subtle smile, damp hair darkening the fabric of her dress where it clung to her skin. Her outline was unmistakable beneath the semi-transparent fabric. If she noticed, she made no attempt to hide it. Nathaniel didn't answer right away. He kept his eyes on the screen, then finally lifted them with a detached expression. History isn't easy. It takes patience, persistence, he said flatly. Are you capable of that? Scarlett didn't blink. I am. Her voice held a hint of flirtation. If you're willing to teach me, I'll work hard. I leaned back into the sofa, stroking the cat curled in my lap. Its soft fur calmed my rising breath. The room felt warmer now, thicker. Nathaniel listed several book titles. Scarlett took notes eagerly. Every few moments, she'd lean forward just slightly, her perfume reaching me in waves. The air between them pulsed, humming with something that made my skin crawl. I turned toward the balcony and noticed my favorite potted plant had begun to wilt. I stood abruptly, the sound cutting through the room like a blade. Both of them looked up. Don't mind me, I said, forcing a smile. I held up a pair of garden scissors, just trimming the dead leaves. Neither responded, but from that night forward, Scarlett began coming over, often. And when she did, Nathaniel started taking her into the study, the one room in our home that no one, not even our daughter, was ever allowed to enter. Except me, and now, her. Scarlett began visiting every 2 or 3 nights, sometimes more. She always looked as if she'd just stepped out of the shower. Cheeks flushed, hair still damp, curling in dark waves around her shoulders. She never came empty-handed. A pie, a bag of peaches, a bouquet of fresh herbs, and always the same excuse. Nathaniel's just helping me understand the Civil War timeline. She'd make herself comfortable in the armchair while I sat quietly on the couch with Lily, our cat purring in my lap. My husband would gather his books, notes, and disappear into the study with Scarlett. For hours. At first, I pretended not to mind. I folded laundry, tended to the plants, braided Lily's hair. But inside, something cold and sharp began growing roots. That study, Nathaniel's sacred space. It was his mental sanctuary, he used to say. A fortress of solitude lined with books, carefully annotated with sticky notes and hand-scribbled thoughts. I was the only one ever allowed inside. Not even Lily was permitted to cross that threshold. Until now. One evening, after Scarlett had arrived and disappeared into the study with Nathaniel once again, I sat still on the couch, cat in lap, the air conditioner humming softly. I waited. Then I stood. I walked to the hallway where the study door remained slightly ajar. I didn't knock. I didn't speak. I simply leaned in and whispered to our cat, releasing him to the floor. He darted forward, straight through the gap in the door. I followed behind casually. Scarlett let out a shriek. Oh my God! She jumped, her eyes wide and startled, one hand clutching the front of her blouse. Nathaniel stood, stiff as a board, eyes full of alarm. His shirt collar was slightly askew. There was a fresh scratch on his lip. I bent down and picked up the cat. This little guy just loves wandering into places he shouldn't, I said lightly. Scarlett's face flushed with color, her breathing shallow. Nathaniel pressed the back of his hand to his mouth. It's nothing, I must have bumped it, he muttered. I said nothing, just turned and left with the cat in my arms. Later that night, While putting away Nathaniel's laundry, I found a white dress shirt tucked deep into the back of his closet, folded neatly, pressed perfectly, but stained. 2 distinct smudges of lipstick, not mine, marked the chest. That was the moment something inside me shifted. I wasn't angry. Not yet. But I was awake. And for the first time, I truly saw him. Nathaniel Cross, the man I'd built my world around, who I had once believed incapable of betrayal. Now I understood the truth. It wasn't about Scarlett, not really. It was about the choice he made. About the part of himself he'd shown the moment the elevator dropped. The part that had reached instinctively for someone else. That was the moment I stopped being the woman who waited. I started becoming the woman who watched and prepared. A week later, I received an invitation to a private gathering hosted by Professor Catherine Doyle and her husband. Catherine had once been my mentor, a brilliant woman with razor-sharp insight, someone I deeply respected. I almost declined, but something in me, maybe pride, maybe instinct, told me to go. The room buzzed with soft laughter and the clink of crystal glasses. The guests were former students and colleagues, most of whom had taken very different paths from mine. Many were now entrepreneurs, authors, CEOs. I, the only one who had remained in academia, felt oddly out of place, not lesser, just separate. Catherine greeted me warmly, her eyes scanning my face with that knowing look she always had. "You've grown quiet, Amelia," she said, "but I've always known still waters run deep with you." Then Jay Whitman arrived. We hadn't spoken in years, not since he left to build a tech empire in Seattle. In college, we'd spent countless nights debating ethics and meaning over coffee. He was older, always a few steps ahead, and just as stubborn as I was. When he saw me, he smiled, not politely, but with familiarity. "Still the most unreadable woman I've ever met," he murmured, handing me a glass of wine. "Some things never change," I replied. As the night wore on, we found ourselves outside, away from the chatter. That's when he said it. "I've been funding a social research project," he explained. "Large scale, global, and I want someone I trust to lead the theoretical wing. No budget cap. You'd have complete freedom. Are you in?" I blinked, stunned. "Why vi etuna? My mere asiko is Jay tilted his head, eyes sharp. "Because I've read your papers, because I know how your mind works, and because it's about damn time you stop hiding behind someone else's brilliance." I smiled, slowly. "Let me think about it." He laughed. "That's the 3rd time you've told me that in a decade." But something had shifted. This time I meant it. When I returned home, Nathaniel was already asleep, or pretending to be. I walked quietly past our bedroom and into the living room. From the window, I could see the warm glow of Scarlett's apartment. The curtains weren't fully drawn. 2 shadows moved behind them. One tall, one graceful, one familiar. I didn't look away. Instead, I called a number I'd saved weeks ago. "Mike," I said when the line clicked. "I want to hire you. I need eyes, discreet ones, on my husband." There was a pause, then a calm reply. "Of course, Mrs. Brooks." I ended the call and looked out the window again. Not with heartbreak, not with desperation. With clarity. Let Nathaniel have his secrets. I would have something far more powerful. Proof. And soon, a new beginning. One that would never include him. Spring arrived quietly, with blossoms along the street and a kind of deceptive peace. But beneath that softness, I was moving, strategizing. Every evening, Nathaniel still visited Scarlett's apartment, under the convenient excuse of tutoring. But his return home came with little tells, the faint perfume on his shirt, the barely concealed bite mark on his wrist, or the smile that lingered just a beat too long. Scarlett, once openly sweet with me, had grown smug. Her greetings turned into nods. Her eyes held amusement, as if I were the last one to get the joke. I let her believe that. What neither of them knew was that I had already installed surveillance in the hallway. Mike, my investigator, had placed discreet motion-activated cameras in the building. We had hours of footage, most of it harmless, until that Thursday. They went to a hotel. Nathaniel pulled her in by the waist as they passed through the lobby. Scarlett leaned in to kiss his neck while he fumbled for a room key. From another angle, Mike caught them entering the suite. No ambiguity, no doubt. Still, I waited. I let the story write itself. Then came the moment I had been preparing for. At dinner one night, after Scarlett had left, Nathaniel sat down across from me. His eyes were relaxed, too relaxed. "Scarlett's been struggling with some of the reading," he said, reaching for his glass of wine. "But she's making progress." I smiled. "I'm glad she's persistent." He looked at me, perhaps sensing something. "You're not upset about all the time I've spent helping her?" I met his gaze calmly. "Of course not, I trust you." His smile faltered, only for a second, before returning. "That's what I've always loved about you," he said. "Your level-headedness." But love wasn't what he meant. He loved my silence, my inaction, my willingness to stand still while he drifted away. Except I wasn't standing still anymore. That weekend, I attended a second meeting with Jay and signed the contract. A 6-figure starting grant, full creative control, and a research team of my choosing. While Nathaniel was losing himself in scandal and secrecy, I was preparing a future. For me and Lily. Mike delivered the final footage that Monday. It was brutal in its clarity. Scarlett pulling Nathaniel's tie, his hands on her waist, her laughter as they collapsed onto the hotel bed. I didn't watch the rest. I didn't need to. The next morning, I forwarded selected images to 3 inboxes: the university dean, Nathaniel's department chair, and his former mentor, a man who had once told him, "Character is the backbone of scholarship." By evening, the story had begun to spread, quietly, then rapidly. Nathaniel came home that night with a storm in his eyes. "Someone's spreading rumors about me," he hissed. "Do you know anything about it?" I looked up from my tea, calm, steady. "Rumors," I said, sipping slowly. "How strange. Because that's what he always taught his students, wasn't it? History isn't about what happens, it's about what gets recorded." And I was recording everything. The fallout was swift. By Friday morning, Nathaniel's face was splashed across an academic gossip blog under the headline, "Respected Professor Caught in Scandal with Colleague's Wife." The university convened an emergency meeting. His lectures were postponed indefinitely. Students whispered in hallways. Emails piled up unanswered. And in the middle of it all, Nathaniel, once so composed, so invincible, crumbled. He tried to fight it, of course. "It's taken out of context," he shouted the night the news broke, pacing our living room. "They're using my private life to ruin my career." Son. I sat on the couch, legs crossed, petting the cat curled beside me. "You gave them the context, Nathaniel," I said softly. "All I did was provide the lens." He stopped, turned, his eyes searched mine. "You what?" I didn't answer, because I didn't need to. Scarlett didn't take long to vanish either. Once the media firestorm began, she disappeared. Suitcase in tow, heels clicking down the hallway. No tearful goodbye. No, "we'll get through this." Just silence. Nathaniel didn't chase her. He came to me instead, broken, angry, desperate. "I made a mistake," he confessed, standing in the doorway, shoulders slumped. "But we built a life, Amelia. Doesn't that count for something?" I rose slowly, met him at eye level. "You didn't just betray me," I said. "You chose someone else. When everything was falling, instinctively, without hesitation." He opened his mouth to protest. But I wasn't finished. "And now you want me to rescue you, to fix it all, again." My voice never rose. It didn't need to. Because for the first time, he was the one who felt small. A few days later, I moved forward with the divorce. The court froze joint assets. Jay, ever steady and patient, helped me assemble the right lawyers and connect with the right people. I signed the final research grant and began recruiting a team. My calendar filled. My days bloomed with energy again. And Lily, she thrived. She stopped asking why Daddy wasn't home and started asking when we'd go hiking again. She learned to braid her own hair. She laughed more, cried less. One afternoon, while picking her up from school, Nathaniel appeared on the sidewalk. He looked thinner, paler, like a man who hadn't been sleeping. "Amelia," he said gently, "can we talk?" I looked at Lily, then back at him. "There's nothing left to say." "I was wrong," he whispered. "I know that now." "I know," I said. His eyes flickered. Hope, maybe. But I crushed it with a smile. "Some things you can't fix, Nathaniel. Some bridges burn clean." He stood there, speechless, as I took Lily's hand and walked away. That night, I lit a candle on the balcony, opened a bottle of wine, and sat alone under the stars. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't grieving. I was free. Sometimes the people we trust the most are the ones who believe we'll never leave, no matter how deeply they wound us. But betrayal has a way of waking up the parts of ourselves we've kept dormant for too long. For years, I thought love meant endurance. I thought silence was strength, and loyalty meant staying even when I was unseen. But the truth, love isn't blind devotion. It isn't shrinking yourself to fit someone else's world. It's choosing yourself over and over again. Nathaniel taught me how deeply someone can fail you when they're convinced you'll forgive anything. But I taught myself how to rise. In the end, the most powerful thing I ever did wasn't exposing his lies or walking away. It was learning that I was never just his wife. I was Amelia Brooks, and I had a life to live, on my own terms. So many women stay into relationships that no longer honor who they are, out of fear, routine, or the belief that starting over is too hard. But starting over isn't failure, it's courage. If you've ever felt small in your own home, if your worth is measured by how silent you stay, or how much you forgive, know this: you have a choice. You can reclaim your voice, your dignity, your future. Seek support. Write your story. Build a life that reflects your worth, not one that hides it. You don't need to wait for someone else to validate your pain before you rise. You don't need permission to begin again. You only need one thing: the decision to choose yourself.